You've just tuned into InnoStation, where the latest and hottest topics are always on air. I'm your host, Cami, and each episode will be serving up some heat with fun chats, fire insights, and special guest appearances with a couple of surprises along the way. Now, water security is a hot topic right now, not just in South Africa, but globally, especially in light of the crisis that we currently find ourselves in. We've invited Chetan Mistry, who is the strategy and marketing manager at Xylem Africa, to give us some insight into the state of water in South Africa and what interventions could possibly help us to turn the tide. Welcome to InnoStation, Chetan.
Thank you so much, Cami. Happy to be here. Welcome
Happy
to
to
all
have
listeners.
you. Yeah. Now, I think let's start off by having everybody at home get to know you a little bit better. Tell us who Chetan is and what fuels your inner fire.
Thanks so much, Cami. So Chetan Mistry, he's a guy from Johannesburg who's had a bit of a colorful journey along the way. I have two streams of things along my life journey. The one stream was a lot of work through NGOs. So I've done a lot of community building and engaging with different people in different contexts, running festivals, doing food feeding schemes, and so many different things like that. And on the career side, many other things that have happened. I've had a journey through many different kind of careers, going from IT support to property management to design to marketing, work for different industries in IT distribution, IT itself, engineering in electrification, now engineering in the water sector. So quite a few different diverse backgrounds that I can have collated over the years.
So you've basically done everything.
I wouldn't say everything, Cami, but it's nice to have quite a bit of variety in my life.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Now, World Water Day is celebrated every year on the 22nd of March, or observed rather, on the 22nd of March. And looking just at news reports, community conversations, and some of the headlines as well, the state of water, especially in South Africa, paints a very concerning picture. Now, what would you say from a global perspective? How do you think things are looking? And also, how are we then in South Africa standing in relation to the global situation right now?
Yeah, so speaking globally, so many things have changed over the last 5-6 years now. I think leading into the pandemic, we've had lots of things like climate change and how it's going to impact the world. We had the pandemic itself, which obviously caused so much of disruption. So the world is looking at itself in a very different light. What wasn't that important a few years ago is now very important. So take that into context. One of the first things that I can tell you when I joined the water sector, I was actually exceptionally surprised at the water and how little we actually knew about water. I come from electrification, and all the rave was about electrification because it all connected to things like people having lights on, as well as your ICT connections, all these type of things.
Yeah.
But water, unlike your Wi-Fi, is far more important than anything else. It's really a lifeline. And I think for way too many decades, other infrastructure, other developments have had far bigger priorities than water. But now more and more communities are beginning to realize that actually water really does need a top priority, mainly because it's one of those resources that is absolutely finite on this planet. And it's the resource that really nobody can do without. We cannot live, we cannot produce, we cannot develop as nations, etc. So it's really elevated the conversation from that perspective, and that's the good thing that's there. Yeah. Whether it's really getting enough of the investments and drive that is needed, that could be debated. But at least from a elevation of topic, it's at least moving in the right direction. Key symptoms of this you can look at in the SDG 6. You will see that a lot of the development goals actually are underpinned with water. You look at things like inequality as an example. You never say water is an element that underpins something like inequality.
Yeah.
But you look at many distressed communities who don't have access to water. It's the divide around different communities who actually are able to sustain themselves better. You're looking at richer nations versus poorer nations and how they can manage themselves. Even within microscopic communities, you see who the ones that are suffer the most. Many rural communities, as an example in Africa, it's the ladies who then have to be under distress because they have to walk long distances to go and collect water and things like that. So it's important to understand these dynamics that are there, and it's important to see that at least water is being elevated to the levels that it needs to. And that's the first sign that we can make sure that we can get to a water secure planet.
Yeah. And just speaking on the topic of access to water, in a lot of communities, like you're mentioning, it is reaching like crisis levels.
Yeah.
And depending on who you're speaking to, they might even refer to it as like a humanitarian emergency. Now, this isn't a challenge that we can tackle in isolation. You have mentioned in previous conversations that we've had that this will take collaboration between community, enterprises, and governments. What do you think we need to see at these different levels to ensure water conservation and accessibility for conservation, right?
Yeah, it's a tough one because you got these three forces, and I'm absolutely behind this notion that we need this triangle of impact with the people themselves, enterprise, and government really working together. One of the key elements is to put aside, some of the personal gains that are there as those three components, and really
Yeah,
look towards the holistic benefit of community at large to make sure that this is progressing. A little bit of selfishness will avoid this progress to be as accelerated as it needs to be.
yeah,
As it stands, I think we're a little bit behind on where we need to be to make sure that we're a water secure community. So what does this mean is that, each of the role players in this kind of context has a role to play, and it's important that they all understand that role and they abide by the role. It ensures that there's a little bit of an ecosystem between these three parties. None of them really work in isolation, so it's important that the rules of engagement are absolutely clear between them.
And I think that is what it's going to take, right? A little bit more of like for the community versus for us and focusing on like individual needs. So that is very true. I agree with you there. And just touching on the issue of rain, I mean, we've had a lot of rain in Johannesburg in particular over the last few weeks. But I think rain sometimes is cause for celebration. But then in some parts of the country, it really isn't. Like in some parts of KZN, for instance, where there's a lot of flooding, there's a lot of damage. I think rain can bring on like a little bit of anxiety. Can you paint a picture of the impact rain has, both from a natural perspective in terms of flooding and damage, and in urbanized areas where we have things like failing infrastructure and the excess of like concrete, creating additional challenges?
Yeah, so water on the whole, I mean, there's two paradigms that we end up having. What is one of those things that the best is a balanced approach to having water. Too much water, too little water is never good, right? So obviously we experience a case where now there's just too much water too quickly, particularly. And this is what we're seeing as far as the strain that's been put in. So if there's sustained rains as an example, that's good. We could still manage it because you can. It's a little bit more measured in its approach, so you can then kind of handle it. When you got rain coming in so quickly as this, then it puts an exceptional level of strain on everything around us. Particularly look at the infrastructure that's there to handle this. In countries like ours in South Africa, most of our cities have never had to have weather patterns as we're experiencing today. So the designs of our water systems haven't been designed to handle such strenuous kind of circumstances. Add to that, the neglect of our infrastructure just puts it in a precarious situation that already a brittle system has now an additional strain. So you can imagine that it's a point of failure that's there. So it's critical that communities, one of the big drivers that will be there for future generations is to be able to be resilient to these type of changes. This climate change that we experience, we're going to see drastic changes in climate in the next few decades. That's the prediction. And it's going to swing. It's the extremes that are going to be there. So our water systems now have to be adaptable to these type of systems. And the more resilient our communities are to these changes, the better it is to be able to handle it. This means that communities have to now drive a lot more intelligent systems, be able to start seeing more of the patterns that are taking place. And this is not only just the weather patterns that are there, but also community patterns. As an example, urbanization, we've seen Gauteng, massive water issues as an example. And part of the drive behind this is the huge strain on infrastructure because of the influx of people, the urbanization that's taking place. So you got a climate change on the one side, you've got urbanization on the other side. So you got so many forces that are playing an impact on the infrastructure that's there. And this means the focus on that infrastructure just needs to be elevated before we enter a place where, the availability of water, access of water has become so strained that it starts having a negative impact on the community itself. Things like the economy is under stress because of these restrictions, etc. And we've got examples of this in South Africa. We've had electricity issues. We've seen the impact in the economy. When we had issues with rail, we saw the impact. We're seeing the impact of it on the economy. And the next thing is water. We're seeing this impact of what impact it's going to have. And water is really intrinsic to everything, whether it's from a consuming perspective or whether it's from a production perspective. If you Google how much of water it takes to produce one T-shirt, as an example, or one microchip, it's actually mind-boggling how much of resources go into any of these type of things. So we need to be cognizant of this, and awareness is so key so that we all can then play that part on it.
Yeah. And just staying within a Gauteng context, we saw that the Gautrain was in the news recently because there was an incident where there was illegal borehole drilling over one of the Gautrain lines, and this resulted in major disruptions. There was service delays, and this ran on for like several days. Now, what is your take on this? Are we seeing a sense of desperation sort of lead people into seeking out unregulated or like illegal means to sort of give themselves access to water?
Yeah, certainly. The human race is a survivor, right? They'll do anything to make sure that they are sustained. So that's exactly what's ending up happening. We saw, again, I love using the correlation between electrification and water because it's so close to us. We just come out of so much load shedding, etc. And we've seen how people have responded to certain things. Immediately when we had load shedding and its frequency, immediately, people putting up solar panels and putting in batteries, etc., without the long-term view of the ramifications behind any of this. We're now seeing things like, are these insured? Are they, up to standard as from fire hazard perspective? Have you got insurance from these type of things? So all these knock-on considerations are coming out post a lot of the work that has been done. So I think for the water sector, we need to learn from this a little bit and saying, how can we be more proactive in these kind of environments? So this whole example that you've given is a classic one where we actually have rules and to govern these type of engagements. You're meant to have a license to put in a borehole, and we're meant to be advising so that there is a check that it doesn't have an impact on land, as an example, because a lot of land in South Africa is dolomite, as an example. What happens if these boreholes collapse? If there's also an element of boreholes are taking water from an aquifer. That aquifer is also limited in its resource. Are we recharging those aquifers? If there's a community of 200 homes all drawing borehole water from this aquifer as opposed to municipal water, what is that impact? What is the impact if we have informal settlements, which we're seeing springing up everywhere at the moment, and there's no sanitation, and that water is now going into the aquifers and causing contaminated water tables? All this has an impact, and all this is governed by regulations and policies that we have. So for us, again, this is why it's important that we do abide by these, as strenuous as it might be. We abide by these so that there is some harmony in whatever we're doing. So this example is because nobody kind of checked whether there's any infrastructure damage would be there if you had to drop in this borehole, and we're seeing the impact. It wasn't a direct water-related impact. Now it became a mobility impact that's there for people who are dependent on the Gautrain. So this is why I say that all these three components are important to play a role in water. The governments come up with strong policies, and in South Africa we have some good policies that are in place. And again, it's a question of enforcement. At the same time, if enforcement isn't there, human nature loves getting away with certain things. If we know there's no cops in a certain road, many people would end up speeding. That type of thinking that is there. Let's not have that mentality, meaning understanding that there might be an impact for others that might be there. It's a bit more of a selfless type of mentality we need to drive, but more of a human kind of flavor that we need to end up having with these kind of context that's there. And important that all three players then start holding each other accountable. In this case, because somebody has flaunted regulation, are people being called out on it, and are people held accountable to this? Is government held accountable for enforcing the policy? Is the person held accountable for not actually holding up the policies? Those type of things. And this is for all spheres. You look at things like, different industries. We're seeing now continuous reports about industries pumping effluent water that is not on regulation into water streams, and this impacts people down the road. It was one of the saddest things to hear in KZN a couple of years ago that a lady was desperate for water and she's drinking water and she knows that she's downstream from industry, but that's the only source of water that she has. What
Right.
does she do? So she knows it's contaminated and she's drinking it. She knows it's going to be harmful for people. And we as human society can just sit here and let that be. It can't. And we need to all play that role. So it's important that we are coordinating on what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think at a community level, are there like any alternatives to like boreholes that people could possibly tap into that aren't necessarily as like large scale as borehole drilling, but could help even in instances of like the story that you just shared, where there is contaminated water all around and it's the only source available. So what alternatives could we look into?
I don't see it as an alternative. I see it as water as a strategy. We need to kind of make sure that we have a strategic approach to understanding water and how do we manage water. And different solutions will be there for different environments. It's not a one size fits all type of approach. So, urban environments will be very different to rural environments and things like that. And each one of those based on the context, how far they are to the nearest water resource, or how close are they to urbanization, all these type of things will be there. If you're in an urban context, what kind of strategies can you put into place? And there's so many things, small and big, that we can drive to ensure that we lead to those. And there are some grassroots of these. It's important that they're accelerated. Things like having buildings that are self-sustaining, having a zero water approach, meaning that that we account for every single drop of water and reuse as much water as possible within its own ecosystem. And that helps with things like less effluent going out into our sewers and water treatment plants. And we have a more of a decentralized approach to a lot of the water that we have. We need to let go of our guard in being okay with drinking reused water. I mean, there's a stigma attached to these type of things, but it has to come. We need to be able to know what we can and what we can't do. We need to make sure that we catch every drop, something simple as a rain harvesting system in every home, as we have solar panels in very many homes nowadays. And how can we capture that water? We have to understand that we can separate our water into gray water and black water, as an example, which is sewer versus gray water, which isn't too contaminated, and it can be used in other places like guarding the water. I mean, the water in the gardens or something of that sort. So it's important that we have the strategy, and there's so many tools and simple things and big things that everybody can do to do this. It can be done from an individual's level to enterprise level to governmental level, and if you all can play a role to try and drive what we can to ensure that we have a sustainable community, that would be great.
Yeah, and I think we saw a lot of this back when a lot of the cities were reaching day zero. There was a lot of sort of education around what you can do, how you can reuse certain types of water, and. So I think strategy is important, because then if we only implement these strategies when we are close to day zero or it is a crisis, then it doesn't really help, because the rest of the time then everybody's just sort of winging it, and that's how we end up with the issues anyway. So strategic approach,
absolutely.
And are there any key thoughts and actions that you would like to leave us with, just in terms of our mindset and responsibility towards sustainable water use, especially within the context of World Water Day?
Yeah, so I think we, as you kind of indicated, through difficult times, the day zero kind of environment in Cape Town, your consciousness gets elevated. So let's continue that. Let's not let a disaster, so to speak, drive our consciousness to that way. As of today, whoever's listening and people reading articles about water, let's have the mind frame and being conscious of water and the impact of water that's around us. I think again, if I use electricity as an example, it's only after people started putting in solar panels do they realize actually how many kilowatts of energy that they're using. In the same frame of mind, let's start doing the same from a water perspective. Let's put in additional meters and smart meters, etc., to make sure that we can start accounting for what water we have. Can businesses be able to understand where different parts of their businesses, meaning from a potable perspective, from a production perspective, from a wastage perspective, how much is actually being used? So they can put in, again, smart bulk meters, etc. They can put in digital systems to try and see how they can measure their water consumption. Can they look at making sure that every single building is now policy to have rainwater harvesting as a bare minimum, as an approach? It really doesn't cost that much to think that way. For new buildings, if I'm not mistaken, I think in Cape Town, one of the drivers was for new buildings to come up and to avoid the strain on the sewer system. It was a must to include water reticulation, reuse type of design into the buildings. Can we not
Wow.
have a policy for every single building now, so that it's actually driven? Can we not ensure that governments who are overseeing big industries, that they are responsible in the work that they're doing? Are they not discharging water that could be harmful for other people around them?
Mm.
These type of things is a coordinated effort that's there. And there are so many technologies available. There are so many shifts in behavior that we can all adopt. There are
Yeah.
so many tools that we can use. So let's look for these and find these, so that we can make that impact. And I think anything small or big will have a lasting impact on a community, because water has that nature behind it. If we
Mm.
protect that resource, it will be protected for generations if we have the mentality and we have a sustainable mindset behind it. So that's the mentality we've got to take forward, and hopefully that will make sure we shift away from a distressed scenario to a very secure scenario.
Mm. Those are really great insights, Chetan. And I think this is such an important conversation, especially now within the context of like what's been happening. And yeah, I genuinely hope that like we can keep on having the conversation, and that this episode even will trigger like more conversations like this. Because I think it does take education as well. I think is a great place to start, just like learning what all is out there and what you could possibly do at a small scale. And then we can gradually just sort of build it out into other sectors and other areas of our lives. And hopefully there's cross pollination and there's collaboration between, the state and communities and also enterprises as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there is definitely green shoots there. I mean, if we do a lot of CSR work as general, personally, as
Mhm.
well from a corporate perspective. And if you go into school today, the level of knowledge as far as water, its importance, and what's affecting our water has elevated tremendously from when I was in primary school, as an
Yeah.
example. That's a great start. And we need to accelerate that. We need to accelerate that people want to be involved and join the water sector professionally, as an example, because of the meaningful impact. In fact, that's one of my journeys. I did not expect how meaningful my work would be joining the water sector in this way. I thought it was just a
Yeah.
career development move, but it's actually added meaning to what I'm doing, because it has not only an impact from a commercial perspective, but really on people's day-to-day lives. And that
Right.
is so amazing that we can shift that. And it's good to be able to, walk in front of a community that has never had clean water, or they have to walk 20 or 30 kilometers to get some water. And now they can, at a reach of a tap, they can open a tap and clean water comes up and they can drink this. It's
Yeah.
amazing the impact it has on the community that allows kids to go to school. It allows people to spend less time going and trying to access water, and they can focus on things like economic development or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And it just shows that just one of these things, what does it enable? It enables so many things where communities are brought together. There's elevation of uh, of progress. There's productivity and all these type of things. So it's so beneficial, and it's a
Yeah.
springboard enabler, and so many things around it.
Yeah, and I think it's been the same for me, just like I mean, water isn't necessarily like, yeah, we know the basics of like, try your best to like not waste water, etc. But I think engaging with like Xylem and your content as well, it really has shifted my perspective with water too, right? Like, I genuinely take it seriously. I'm like,
Yeah.
I get upset. I see a random tap running outside. I'm like, immediately call the caretaker. Why is there a tap? Just because you
100%.
become so you become so conscious of how important it actually genuinely is. So yeah, I think consider joining the water industry, guys. It's
Totally. And your caretaker now so it's probably thinking, better fix a tap before Cami sees it. And
like
then be
it's
told
like
that it has to actually fix that. So now he's going to
exactly,
proactively fix it. And next before we know it, it's part of his DNA now that he will make sure these things happen. And that's exactly it.
exactly.
Behavior becomes second nature then, and that becomes the norm. Then that will be really beneficial to all of us. I mean, this is especially key when we're hearing things like in South Africa, we're one of the highest have the highest usage of water per capita.
Mm,
From an average perspective, I think we're like about 60 or 70 liters above the global average. And
wow.
that's massive, which means that we do not respect the water that we have.
Yeah, I think we definitely do take it for granted. Just, I mean, you mentioned like how things have changed even at a school level. And from when I was in school, literally things have changed because my siblings right now will say, no, we don't have like the spring day thing where everybody splashes each other with water and. But back
Yeah,
when I was in like primary school and like early high school, that was a thing. Like we genuinely went to school looking forward to playing with water,
yeah,
essentially. Yeah,
totally. That's amazing. Great to
it's
hear
good
that.
to see things change. But Chetan, before I let you go, I would love to play a round of hot takes with you. I'm gonna ask you a series of rapid fire questions, and then you just answer hot or not, depending on how you feel about the topic.
Hot or not?
Yeah, like hot or not. Yeah.
Oh, hot or not? Okay.
Yes. Cool. How do you feel about paddle? Like
Hot.
the sport paddle? Do you play paddle?
Every now and again. It's not my
Oh,
favorite
okay.
sport, but every now and again.
Okay. How do you feel about servant leadership?
Hot. If
Mm.
there's a very hot, we can put that in as well.
I'll put in a very hot just for you. How do you feel about Minecraft?
Not. It's a
Not.
hot for my son.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a not for you.
No.
How do you feel about taking a run in the rain?
Hot.
Have you done that before?
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
It's not just running. I mean, I play soccer on a casual basis and socially. It's the
Oh,
best
okay.
thing, especially on a hot day. You've had a hot day and you come, you don't know whether it's going to rain or not.
Yeah,
You, especially with today's weather patterns, and then you're about to hit the field and the clouds open, but you decide to play anyways. It's one of the
yeah.
best experiences.
I mean, I imagine it would be fun, but like, I'm always worried about a cold. I'm like, I'm gonna catch a cold.
It might be worth it.
Maybe. How do you feel about watching soccer live, like at the stadium?
Very hot.
Mm. How do you feel about living off the grid for a month?
Hot.
Really?
Yes, I think I'd be a little scared, to be honest,
Yeah.
because we're so used to so many things around us.
Mm.
But the reality is that we've really forgotten what's out there. And I have a very stark example of this. We were traveling with a group of friends. We went to a very rural community
Mm.
in the middle of the school. I mean, pretty much rice paddies and that type of thing all around. There's one structure, a three-story building right in the middle for kilometers, more or less.
Yeah.
And we stayed over. I mean, it was hard because very rudimentary sanitary, very rudimentary rooms.
Mm.
Big cockroaches. You're in rural environments. You don't know what a cockroach looks like unless you're in a rural environment. But the most amazing experience was at night we decided to go on top of the roof on the three-story building. So the only lights were there from the main building were on the ground floor. So
Yeah.
everything above that was pretty much pitch black. And we
Mm.
looked up and saw the stars on this clear night. And it
Mm.
was absolutely clear. It was phenomenal to be able to see this. And to kind of make the whole scene even better was to see a whole field full of fireflies. And
Oh
that scene
wow.
was just amazing. And the fact that we've so urbanized
Yeah.
has made us realize that, we're in a very false kind of world and we're forgetting to see all the good things just right next to us. So being off
Yeah.
the grid for a month or something like that sort will just elevate and have an opportunity to reconnect with nature. Our
Mm.
forefathers, I believed, were so harmonious with nature, and they didn't
Yeah.
have issues like that we have it because they were in harmony with nature, and
Right.
they
That
lived
is true.
with that kind of correlation. They respected nature, and nature respected them, so to speak. Now
Yeah.
I got the sense that because we disrespect nature, nature's disrespecting us.
Yeah.
Climate change is because we have used all the facility that's been given to us and these type of
Yeah.
things. So that's my notion.
No, that is very true. And I totally agree with you. I think if you treat the planet well and it treats you well back. And
Yeah,
my little thing on that is like you treat Mother Nature bad and she turns on you, and that's not pretty.
yeah, true.
But
Great.
how do you feel about anonymous donations?
Hot.
Hmm. It's always
Well,
good.
what, me giving the donation or people? So,
Just in general, like people making anonymous donations, you making anonymous donations.
maybe back my thing up. If I'm making an anonymous donation, that's exactly how it should be. It shouldn't be about me as the individual in the donation. I
Yeah.
do get disappointed if I'm because I've worked in those kind of environments and I'm receiving and I get a donation coming in, 10,000 rand as an example, and it's no name, anonymous.
Yeah.
How do you reciprocate with that person? And that's my disappointment that you can't reciprocate,
Right.
knowing that so many people would have benefit from that donation.
Yeah, I think it's the gratitude that makes you feel like, oh, I would like to say thank you, but
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
And how do you feel about organized charity runs?
Organized charity runs.
Yeah, so like with things like the color run, where people sort of run and get colorful powders thrown on them for like charity and stuff.
Yeah, hot. I think
Mm.
these type of things are good. You run for water, people get aware of it. You run for breast cancer, people are aware of these type of things. So it does have its place in society, and it's important that we have that. For me,
Yeah,
it's a multitude of touch points that we can have for a specific end game, and we
yeah,
need these things. We live in a society where we need to inspire people differently, and if
hmm
a run inspires people, then so be it. This is what we need.
yeah. And I think right now, especially because run clubs are like a thing, so I think
Yeah.
it would be cool to just like run club for charity.
Yeah, sometimes I've been in the crossfire of these runs, and I wonder actually the percentage of people who are actually running. Sometimes I'm surprised how many people are walking.
No, true, true. But apparently now they've become like a dating thing. So people go there to like meet people as well. So nobody's
Absolutely,
really, yeah,
absolutely. You don't know your neighbor, but you can at least go to a run and
actually,
make friends.
actually, not you calling us out. And how do you feel about early morning hikes?
Love it. So very hot.
I think especially if like the end like prize is a lovely like sunrise scene. I feel like yeah, I'd get up early for that.
Yeah, totally. Too many things to actually look forward to early morning. I'm an early bird by nature, so the morning is good for me. So something like that is great.
Must be nice. I'm a morning person, but not an early. But yeah, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us, Chetan, and for giving us those great insights on sort of the state of water in South Africa and globally as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cami. This was fun as well. Thanks for the chance to chat and share so many of my thoughts. And
Of
it's so
course.
good to see young people like yourselves driving these kind of topics.
Mhm.
So